This is a recording of a presentation that I gave in April 2022 at the Big Data and Artificial Intelligence Conference in Johannesburg. Interesting statistics out of a couple of recent surveys. 95% of organizations have a data strategy in place. But in spite of the fact that more and more organizations agree that a data strategy is important, more and more organizations plan to rely on data to drive predictive decision making, only 26% believe that the quality and integrity of their data is high enough and suitable for analysis. 66% of organizations talk about their backlog of data debt that negatively impacts their new data initiatives. We all understand the concept of technical debt. Sweat the asset, make that old technology that's never really worked very well work because we've invested money in it. Well, data becomes an even bigger challenge when we're trying to use it for new data initiatives. 40 years of data that's been poorly captured, poorly managed, creates huge issues in an organization that's trying to modernize and move towards becoming data-driven. And strangely or concerningly, despite the very large adoption of a data strategy, only 30% of companies believe that their data strategy is clear, understood, and actionable. One of the big challenges, culture eats strategy for breakfast, Peter Drucker. So how do we move towards having a data-driven culture where our strategy is meaningful and useful? Got to answer the million-dollar question, how do we get business to be passionate about data? And really what this boils down to is, how do we build the link between our data management capabilities and the bonuses of our business managers and executives? Well, borrowing some slides from a presentation done by our partner Precisely, we need to look at bridging the gap between business and IT by linking what we're doing or wanting to do from a data management perspective towards what the business is trying to do for its strategic goals and objectives. We can look at these business goals in terms of three key areas. At the level of transforming the business, what are the critical KPIs and objectives that are keeping our executives and our shareholders awake at night? How do we achieve those goals? What is necessary to be put in place from a data management perspective in order to achieve those goals? And this is really speaking to your executives and their key indicators. At an operational level, how do we improve business operations? How do we manage and enhance our business processes and our efficiency to grow the business? And then finally, at a tactical level, what are the issues that are getting in the way of us doing business? What are the critical data assets that have an analytical impact or a compliance impact or an operational impact, and that are stopping us from moving forward? For example, at the moment, I'm dealing with an organization who have a number of ambitious goals and objectives, but everything's on hold because they are busy upgrading their ERP system, and the data migration is not going to plan, and they are months and months behind schedule and simply overwhelmed. So in this case, the tactical requirements may overwhelm the strategic and the operational requirements because they're blocking them from moving forward. So one can look at our business goals and objectives, and we can categorize them in terms of these three areas, speaking to different stakeholders and different timescales. When we start to do that, we can start to identify individuals' particular goals. For example, there might be a requirement to improve data privacy and data protection in order to deliver POPI. There might be a requirement to enhance customer retention, and that may be driving an IT goal to deliver a customer 360 view. And there might be a goal ultimately from a customer perspective to enhance customer care, to improve cross-selling, whatever it might be. So we can see that we have data to minimize risk, we have data to deliver enhanced insights, and we have data to run the business. As we start to build these different categories, start to see that there's relationships and dependencies on particular data sets or data assets or data capabilities that run across different areas of the business. So for example, I might want to enhance customer care. To do that, I need to improve my customer 360 view, but I also need to take care that I'm complying with the PAPAIA regulations for data protection. So there's an underlying dependency on customer data and working around customer data in order to deliver particular goals. That helps us to start to bring together the goals and objectives of different stakeholders, and it helps us to start to identify and prioritize where we can add the most value for one investment. So we can start to centralize our data management investments across the organization rather than each stakeholder, each project, each team making their own investments in an ad hoc way, which ultimately may end up costing far more or simply not achieving the desired effect. Now we're starting to think more strategically. If we look at artificial intelligence as a goal, it's really important to understand that the differentiator for artificial intelligence is data. It's no longer the algorithm. So what we're seeing is there's open source algorithms available. Any data scientist, any data analyst can, go onto Google, do some searches, and they're going to find similar algorithms to achieve particular goals. But the differentiator, what makes the difference between your business's AI algorithm and somebody else's is the quality of the data that you're using to train the AI or to leverage the AI. This is why we're seeing firms like Google making massive investments in data rather than in algorithms. Bias is like the snake in the data grass. We're all sitting with inherent decision-making processes that we've built up over 30, 40, 50 years. The biases that we have built into those decision-makings are built into our data. So if, for example, we have typically over time not allocated loans to a particular group of people, that bias is going to be built into the data, irrespective of what our current or future planning might be. Another straightforward example is location in data may be driving our buying decisions. A store that was extremely profitable before COVID because it was in a particular location may suddenly find itself in the woods now, where people have shifted their buying behavior because they're working from home, they're not coming into the office, they're shopping at different times, and they're shopping in different locations. So the bias that tells us this location was a good location pre-COVID may not be valid as we move into a post-COVID world. Finding data is a people and process problem. So we're going to talk a little bit about data management capabilities and technologies as well. But ultimately, we need to recognize that we need to get the right people and shift the culture and the processes to ensure that we're finding data or able to find data, that we're documenting data correctly, that we can trust data, and that we're capturing data correctly first time. We talk about the 1-10-100 rule, where capturing data correctly the first time costs us R1. To go and correct faulty data later costs us approximately 10 Rand. And if we leave that faulty data in the system, the problems that it creates for us are probably in the region of 100 times more expensive than if we capture correctly the first time. So again, we need to look at our people and processes in terms of how we capture data to achieve our business goals. And finally, if we recognize that data is a strategic asset, we need to start building our own business processes around managing data in the same way as we have business processes for managing finance, HR, master data, etc. So we really need to think of data strategically and start to plan the business processes and the capabilities that allow us to meet our strategic goals. So how do we do that if we look at it from a data management perspective? Many business people, and the theme of the event that we were talking at, artificial intelligence, when we think about data management, we tend to think about data as analytics, as reporting, as the ability to make this, or to drive decisions. So that tends to be the focus of business. It's, can you give us a report that's going to answer the question, where's my most profitable customer? Can you give us an AI model that's going to answer the question, what kind of product should I be building next in order to best address our markets? But in order to deliver that AI or that advanced analytics capability, there's a whole bunch of data management capabilities that come into play and need to be delivered. So with our enterprise information model that I'm displaying here, we try to show you some kind of dependencies in terms of what needs to be in place in order to meet a particular business goal. So to deliver advanced analytics, we need to have some kind of data store, whether that might be a data warehouse, a traditional sort of structured data model, or that might be moving towards the data lake, or the data warehouse, the data house, the data lake. All of these new technologies where we are bringing together vast amounts of data, both structured and unstructured, and making that available for analytics. In order to deliver my data warehouse, there's a bunch of data capabilities that need to be put in place that tend to be IT driven. So we need to be able to bring our data together to consolidate it into a single place through data integration. That might be through ETL, it might be change data capture, which is real-time movement of data as it changes in our operational platforms, syncing it into our analytics platforms. That might be more and more moving towards streaming data sets with technologies like Kafka. Or that might be virtualization engines. We also need to start to concern ourselves around data security and ensuring that we are not exposing sensitive data to the wrong people. So we need to start looking at fine-grained access control. How do we, at an attribute level, at a row level, limit access to certain data sets for certain individuals based on their role and their responsibilities within the organization, but without limiting their ability to do analysis on the data. So at this level, we're looking at technologies like anonymization, like tokenization, but maintaining the integrity of the data so that we can still draw inferences from it without giving away state secrets. And then we want to look at metadata and data modeling. So here we're looking at building context around the data. How do we understand what our data means? What's the definition of our KPIs? What is it that we're actually reporting on? And that tends to be driven from an IT perspective more typically. And then particularly when we start getting into the more technical aspects of metadata, what does our data look like? What are our systems? What are our data models? How do we access data? How do we find data? Can we trust the data? These are all the kind of questions we want to answer from a metadata perspective. And then underpinning all of that, we have our data architecture function, which is where from an IT governance perspective, we are identifying which systems do we have in place, how do we get reuse, how do we maximize our IT investment in order to get the maximum return. And this is an IT governance function, which builds the capabilities to deliver all of these IT capabilities. But we also have a bunch of capabilities that come in more driven by business. So at this level, we want to think about data governance. This is about decision making. This is about understanding from a business stakeholder perspective, have we signed off this KPI? Do we agree with the report specification? Are we comfortable and do we trust the artificial intelligence model that we're using to make decisions from a business perspective? Can we trust it? From an information security perspective, can our information officer have visibility into the data security? Are there policies defined that he can understand and trust, and have those policies been implemented by the data security team? From a data quality perspective, is our data fit for purpose? Can we trust the data that we are using to make the decision? Do we know what level of reliability we have in terms of the data that we're using or want to use? And what strategies do we have in place to address data quality issues that may arise from an analytics perspective? And then last but not least, from a master data perspective, do we have a single trusted source of our master data that's reusable? Do we know what a customer looks like? Do we know, do we have that single view of the customer that we want to be able to leverage for analytics and for compliance and for managing the customer experience? Now, clearly, if we're not trying to achieve artificial intelligence, we may not need all of these capabilities in place. So for example, if our goal is to deliver a single view of the customer, then what we really need to have in place is some level of data governance, some level of data quality, and our master data store. But that still means we need a data architecture function for that single view. We need to understand what our customer data looks like and where we find it. We need to have the security in place, etc. So this view gives us an understanding of what needs to be in place. And what we can do with, from our strategy perspective, is link our capabilities into meeting our specific goals and identify gaps, which allows us to build a roadmap that is now linked to business. I.e., for example, we don't have a strong level of customer data quality. Customer data is imperative for 5 of our business goals: to improve the customer experience, to improve the customer 360 view, and to look at data privacy, so we can build a capability or plan to improve our data quality. What I'm not trying to say is that we have to have, for example, end-to-end data governance across the organization in order to achieve a particular goal. What I'm suggesting is that we need that thin slice of data governance, of data quality, of master data to give us the quality of master data that we need, for example, for customer, for product, for channel, to allow us to do our customer analytics around the customer experience, how our customer interacts with us, when and where and how. And similarly for the other capabilities, one can start to build these capabilities in slices to achieve particular goals. And basically think about a 3-month plan. What do we want to achieve in the first 3 months, in the first 6 months, and then in the first 12 months, and everything else we would park for, the next year, and then revisit our strategy, identify what has been achieved, what has fallen by the wayside, what needs to be added, what needs to be modified, and build the capability up over time. But by doing this at a strategic level with a strategic plan, firstly, we can build our business case in terms of what we want to achieve, because we are linking this back to the bonuses of the executive and the decision makers that hold the budget. But we're also building a capability over time that makes sense, that we can align to the culture of our organization, that we can shift the culture, and we can build the capabilities. So just very briefly about us, we've been around for nearly 20 years, have a very strong focus on enterprise information, but particularly on the foundational capabilities: data governance, data quality, metadata management, master data management, as per our name. Around 50% of our customers are in financial services, banking and insurance, but the other 50% across a broad range of industries: manufacturing, retail, utilities, government, etc., etc. We approach the problem of data management holistically. Education and certification through our partnership with eLearning Curve. We offer a bunch of data management certifications. We have a collection of best-of-breed tools, really bringing a modular capability that you can build up over time, that we can solve specific problems, and with the focus of filling in niche areas, as an example, data privacy, that are not well served by the traditional IT players. And then an implementation and consulting capability, where if we say to you we can do something with a particular technology, we need to be able to deliver that. So we really have to live by what we promise. Last thing to remember is that integrity creates trust. Far too many BI solutions, self-service BI, AI, etc., are hamstrung by the fact that business doesn't trust the data. So what we really want to focus on in terms of our data strategy is to build data that we can trust. By delivering data integrity, we build trusted data, and we maximize the investment that we're making from an IT perspective.